The story of the resurrection, it's so much more than just an empty tomb. It's really about what happened next. The scriptures actually lay out more than a dozen separate, distinct appearances of the risen Christ. So in this explainer, we're going to dive into those key encounters, the ones that completely transformed this small group of followers and really ended up changing the world.
Okay, so picture this. It's dawn. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary, they're walking to the sepulchre. They're expecting to anoint a body. A sad but necessary task. But when they get there, everything is wrong. The huge stone is rolled away. And there's an angel described as looking like lightning. And the message he gives them is just stunning, world-altering. He is not here, for he is risen.
So that announcement, it immediately brings up the huge question that's going to drive this whole story, right? I mean, an empty tomb is one thing. That's a mystery. But a risen person? That's something else entirely. And that question, where did he go? It sets the stage for this incredible series of encounters that would become the very foundation of a new faith.
All right, so who were the very first people to actually see the risen Christ? You might be surprised. It wasn't the powerful leaders or the prominent men. It was the women who had stuck by him right to the very end. Let's dig into these first, absolutely crucial encounters.
The very first one-on-one encounter we have on record is with Mary Magdalene. And if you read John's account, it's just so personal. She's there, weeping outside the tomb, completely lost in her grief, and then Jesus appears, and all he does is say her name. That one word, it changes everything. Her grief just dissolves, and she's given a mission: go tell the others.
Now think about how significant this is. The very first witness is a woman, alone. This wasn't some big public show. It was a deeply personal, quiet confirmation. And she gets this incredible job to be the first one to bring the news of the resurrection to the disciples, who, by the way, are still hiding out in fear.
Okay, so right after that, as this group of women is literally running to tell the disciples what the angel said, they have their own encounter. And this wasn't just, a fleeting glimpse or something they thought they saw. This was a physical, tangible meeting. Yeah, Matthew's account gives us this really powerful detail. It says they held him by the feet and worshipped him. That's so important because it just hammers home the physical reality of it all. This wasn't a ghost or some kind of vision. This was him. And then he tells them the same thing the angel did. We're going to meet up in Galilee.
So you can see the pattern here, right? It starts with these very personal encounters, and then it expands to the core group of disciples. And this was absolutely essential because, let's be honest, not everyone was buying it. There was just so much confusion, fear, and some pretty deep skepticism.
We're also told that Jesus appeared privately to Simon Peter. Now, we don't get all the details of this meeting, but you can't overstate its importance. I mean, this is Peter, the leader, the one who had just publicly denied even knowing Jesus. So this personal confirmation, which is mentioned in a couple of places, had to be a huge moment of restoration for him.
All right, so fast forward to later that same evening. The disciples are holed up in a room, door locked, completely terrified. And then, out of nowhere, Jesus is just there, standing among them. And to prove it's really him, that he's not a ghost, he does something incredible. He shows them the wounds in his hands and his side.
But there's a problem. One of the apostles, Thomas, wasn't in the room. So when the others, buzzing with excitement, tell him what they saw, his reaction is just total, defiant disbelief. He basically says, no way, I won't believe it unless I can see and physically touch the wounds myself. He sets a really high bar for proof.
So a full week goes by. They're all gathered again, and this time, you bet Thomas is with them. And just like before, Jesus appears. But this time it feels like the whole appearance is for Thomas. Jesus walks right up to him, directly addressing his doubt, and invites him to do the very thing he said he needed to do.
And in that moment, faced with the very evidence he demanded, all of Thomas's doubt just crumbles. And what comes out of his mouth is one of the most powerful, profound confessions of faith you'll find anywhere in the Bible: my Lord and my God. It's just this incredible climax, taking him all the way from hardcore skeptic to true believer.
So these appearances, they're not just about private proof, They start with one person, then a small group. It's like they're building momentum. They're all leading up to something much bigger, a public purpose, a mission. And that's what we call the Great Commission.
Okay, so after all these intimate encounters, these private confirmations for the apostles, something truly extraordinary happens. We're talking a massive, large-scale group appearance. This was not in some locked room. This was, for all intents and purposes, a public event.
Yeah, the Apostle Paul writes that Jesus appeared to more than 500 believers at the same time. Just let that number sink in for a second. 500. This isn't a handful of confused followers. It's a huge crowd. This is the single largest reported appearance of the risen Christ, period. And the historical significance of this is just massive. Why? Because when Paul wrote about this years later, he made a point of saying that most of those 500 people were still alive. He was basically saying, hey, don't just take my word for it, go ask them yourself. It was this wide open invitation to verify the story, which shows an incredible amount of confidence that the event really happened.
And then, just as he promised, we have that pivotal meeting back in Galilee. It happens on a mountain. Jesus meets with the 11 apostles, and this is where he lays out their mission, a mission for the entire world.
He starts by making this incredible declaration of his universal authority, and then he gives them what we now know as the Great Commission. And listen, this isn't a friendly suggestion. It's a command. It's the command that's going to define the entire purpose and direction of his followers for the next 2,000 years and counting. So it's really important to understand that these appearances weren't just, interesting things that happened. They had a profound, a radical, and a totally observable impact. They completely changed the people who saw them. They turned terrified followers and hardened skeptics into unbelievably bold leaders.
I mean, just look at the transformations. You've got James, Jesus' own brother, who was a total skeptic while Jesus was alive. But after a personal appearance, he becomes a leader, a pillar of the church in Jerusalem. Or the apostles themselves. They go from hiding in a locked room to boldly preaching in the streets, willing to die for what they knew they saw. And then, of course, the most dramatic of all, Saul of Tarsus, the church's #1 enemy. He has this blinding encounter on the road to Damascus and is transformed into the Apostle Paul, its greatest missionary. It's an incredible turnaround.
And this whole series of appearances really culminates, years later, with a vision to the Apostle John. And this wasn't some quiet meeting on a mountain in Galilee. This was a vision of cosmic, overwhelming authority. And the declaration Christ makes pretty much sums up the whole story. I am he that liveth, and was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore. So that leaves us with this final thought. These weren't just a few isolated stories. This was a whole series of distinct encounters. Different people, different places, all happening over several weeks. So the real question isn't just, did this stuff happen? The bigger question is, how did these encounters end up completely changing the world?